Our Good Friday meditation comes from Matthew chapter 27, verses 45 to 51. And the title to this reflection is The Torn Curtain. Matthew 27, beginning at verse 45. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. At about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, and the rocks split. I would like to read that last verse one more time because that is the focus of this Good Friday reflection. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When Jesus uttered his seventh word from the cross, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Not from bottom to top, but from top to bottom. What does this torn curtain from top to bottom mean? In the Jewish temple, there was an inner room called the Holy of Holies, an inner sanctum. In this Holy of Holies, the presence of God lived. A veil or curtain separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple. Only one man was ever allowed to go behind that veil or curtain into the presence of God. That was the Jewish high priest, and he could only go in there once a year on the Day of Atonement. Once a year, the high priest carried a bowl of blood into that most holy place, and he would pour that blood over the mercy seat of the ark. He would take that blood, enter behind the veil or the curtain, where nobody else was ever allowed to go, enter the Holy of Holies, which was filled with the bright light of God's glory. And he would pour the blood over that mercy seat and leave. The blood poured over the mercy seat meant that the only way for sinful people to enter into the presence of a holy God was through the shedding of blood. No one had access to that room. A huge curtain or veil or drape separated that room from the rest of the temple. That curtain meant that entry into the presence of God was prohibited. Never would an Israelite cross that barrier. That curtain was a barrier between our sin and God's holiness. This is what God was teaching Israel through that veil. The size of this veil, the size of this curtain was incredible. 60 feet long, 30 feet high, and 10 inches thick. Almost a foot thick. It took 300 priests to manipulate it. It was interwoven with a mass of cherubim who are the guardian angels of God's holiness. Now here's what gives me chills. At the very moment, at the very instant, Jesus died on the cross, that 60-foot long, 30-foot high, 10-inch thick curtain was ripped in two from top to bottom. Not from bottom to top, top to bottom. Meaning God did it. God ripped it. God took that 10-inch thick curtain and He tore it apart. And anyone could now enter into the Holy of Holies through that blood. God took His hand at the top and He ripped that veil open all the way to the bottom. This happened at 3 p.m, just when the priests were busy in the temple, so they all saw it. This is Passover day. This is when the lambs are being slaughtered. God taking His hand and ripping it from top to bottom occurs exactly at the precise instant when Jesus dies. The meaning is obvious. The tearing of the curtain means Christ's sacrifice. Christ's blood has forever opened the way for sinful people to enter into the presence of a holy God. Jesus' blood has torn open the curtain. Jesus' blood has cleansed me of my sin. Jesus has torn open the barrier. Jesus has opened the way for me to come to God. When Christ died, God ripped that 10-inch thick curtain apart. And in one split second, the whole Old Testament sacrificial system was destroyed. Or better, fulfilled. The curtain that bars the way to God is ripped open. When Jesus Christ is your Savior, this all means that you have open access into the presence of God, into the loving heart of God. Your sin is paid for, washed away. The curtain is torn. The veil is ripped open. And through the cross, we all enter into the Holy of Holies, into the wonderful, beautiful, loving presence of God. Salvation is completed. God has opened the way into His heart and into His presence through Jesus. This is the meaning of Good Friday.